Good evening. We're happy you all are here. This is a nice crowd for this evening. Hope we get a lot of good work done. Before we begin our meeting, Mr. Bolden will be offering a prayer.
Let us bow for just a moment of prayer. Father, we thank you yet for another day. We thank you for the gift of life. We thank you for your grace and your mercy. We are so grateful for the opportunity to serve our citizens of the city of Nacogdoches. Grant us the wisdom and the courage to know and do what is right and is good and true. May we speak out when it's time to speak out and listen patiently and receptively when it is time to listen. May we always be guided by the spirit of community, by the spirit of justice, and by the spirit of love. Give us the ability to work together in harmony even when there's honest disagreements. Father, I pray for this agenda set before us this evening. Please give us assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Nacogdoches. We pray that what we do here tonight is pleasing in your name. Thank you for your goodness and your love. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Bolden. I'd like to call the meeting to order for August 21st, 2018. We will start with open forum. The open forum is the public's opportunity to address council on any matter related to the city that is not on the agenda. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, City Council generally cannot discuss, consider, or take action on matters not listed on the agenda. Your comments are limited to 3 minutes, and we have Mr. Charles Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilman. We are so blessed to have a city staff of excellent competence and integrity. Some may feel that's a little bit strange coming from me because I often stand up here with some comments about something that's going on. But we are so blessed to have high-quality folks. They have kept us out of trouble. All you have to do is look at the situation that the hospital's in, where the board rubber-stamped the administration, and the administration was not as good as what Jim Jeffers provides to the city of Nacogdoches. That said, the council is supposed to be providing leadership and oversight. If you don't at least question what the city staff is providing you, you're demeaning their effort at having made a presentation. And you're not seeing to it that they have any incentive whatsoever to actually provide you with a good presentation, even though they're very skilled at doing such and should be able to provide you with a great deal of information and good background on the subject. And so I hope that in the future the council will provide the leadership that Nacogdoches deserves and will provide some oversight of the city administration. Nobody can be expected to be 100% perfect all the time. And occasionally things need to be questioned a little more thoroughly than others. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Agenda item number 3 are items to be removed from consent agenda. And if there is nothing to be removed, then the chair will entertain a motion for approval.
I move that we approve.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. And we come to our regular agenda. First, we have a public hearing for the proposed tax rate. And Pam Kerbo, our
Mayor, Council,
financial manager.
tonight is the first of 2 public hearings that we will hold on both the tax rate and the budget. Just as a reminder, The current tax rate is 59.28 cents per $100 valuation. Our effective tax rate for the 18-19 year was calculated at 0.57756, and the budget that we are going to present to you is based on a proposed tax rate of 0.6169 per $100 valuation. Property tax revenue, this next slide, one more. There we go. The next slide shows the difference between the adopted property tax revenue for the current 17-18 fiscal year compared to the proposed 2018-2019. And you'll notice that the proposed tax rate generates additional revenue of a little over $703,000. In comparison of the tax rates, we take what Gary Woods at the Appraisal District tells us is an average taxable value after exemptions for Nacogdoches city residents, and that average after exemptions is $86,400. And so we calculate that at the current tax rate of 59.28 cents, shows a tax liability of a little over $512,000 a year. The proposed tax rate of 61.69 cents shows to be a tax liability of $533, which is a $20.82 increase in annual tax liability for this particular average residential value. And with that, I will turn it over to you, and we'll talk to public hearing.
Okay. Since this is a public hearing, we will ask if there is anyone that'd like to speak in favor of the proposed tax rate. Seeing none, is there anyone that'd like to speak against the proposed tax rate? Okay. Council, any questions for Ms. Curbo about the tax rate? I would like to, as a reminder, the proposed tax rate will be voted on by City Council at the September 18th, 2018 City Council meeting to be held here in the City Council chambers at 5:30 p.m. Number 6, public hearing, proposed 2018-19 budget.
It's me again.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, once again, just a reiteration, the proposed tax rate is what this budget is built on. It's based on the 61.69 cents, which generates additional revenue of $703,000. There are several proposed fee schedule changes. As you recall, a couple of years ago, Council voted to implement a 5-year rate study plan, and we're in year 3. There's a couple of items that actually, the year 1 changes, year 1 and year 2 were consistent. Year 3 is the next set of phased-in rate adjustments. The biggest of those in water would be the minimum charges. We changed the way we bill minimum charges. Now they're based on meter size, and so that year 3 phase in, all meters 1 inch and over will have an increase in the actual minimum charge. Most, I would say probably 60 to 70% of residential customers will not see an increase at this point in the minimum charge because it does not affect the 5/8 by 3 inch meter, which most residentials have. So there's also the year 3 phase in on all rate classes. It's kind of difficult to put a percentage on that because every rate class is a little bit different. The industrial rate increase, if you'll recall, we did that a phase in over 5 years, a 20 cent per gallon increase, or per 1,000 gallon increase each of the 5 years. So this year we'll go from $269 to $289. Sewer charges, year 3 brought the first increase since year 1, and the minimum charge is approximately a 2% increase across all rate classes, and the volumetric charge is approximately a 1% increase across all volumetric classes. And then again in sanitation, year 3 is a 5% increase in all rate categories. Sanitation was done a little bit differently. We'll actually redo the rate study for year after year 3. Year 4 and 5 was not projected out. We were going to do these first 3 years and then redo the rate study on sanitation to make sure that we are complying with what we actually need to open new sales and close the current sales. The general fund proposed budget, this just shows a recap of lump sum revenues, about $25.5 million, and expenditures of pretty close to the same. We're going to end the year about $100,000, $60,000, $70,000 less than we began the year with. So this breaks it down between restricted and operational expenditures. And I think I recall last time we talked a little about the restricted is the items that the court can spend certain monies for child safety, building security, and then also the PEG money, which is the funds that we receive from the cable company that is a part of the franchise fee. Yes, and those are part of the restricted expenditures. Utility fund. Same thing, just an overall broad view of the revenues and the expenditures here. One thing to note here is that in the utility, and of course it will be sanitation as well, the expenditure line items, we have it separated between operating expenses, capital expenditures, and then other financing uses. And that is a $9.7 million in here, and that is going to be depreciation, which is not booked as an actual expense in the proprietary funds. It's also going to be funds that we set aside in the sanitation fund for opening and closing the sales out there. So the expenditures are actually split into several categories in the utility fund that they're not in the general fund. Again, sanitation, same thing, $6.5 million worth of revenues, expenditures split out about the same. We should see about $1.8 million there is depreciation and the landfill opening, the amortization for that is not actually included in an operating expenditure account. With that, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open the public hearing for the proposed budget for next year. And is there anyone that would like to speak for? Yes. Dr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Sammy. I'm sorry?
Sorry, I interrupted you. I just was going to get you to state your name.
That's what I was fixing to do.
Yes, sir.
I am Sammy Smith. I'm a Texas CPA. I have a PhD in accounting, and I've spent 42 years as an academic, 26 years of those at SFA, and I am a Regents Professor Emeritus of Accounting at the university. A couple of weeks ago, the Daily Sentinel published revenue expense numbers for the city's various funds for the fiscal years 2016 through 2019, and I crunched some numbers from their data, and some of the things I found were: in the 4 years presented, the Water Sewer Fund will have generated total profits in excess of $34 million, earning an average profit margin of over 44%. Of this, more than $14 million, or approximately 42% of the profits, have been transferred to the general fund. In the 4 years, the Sanitation Fund will have generated total profits of almost $14 million in earnings, with an average profit margin of over 50%. Of this, $8 million will have been transferred to the general fund. If you look at the totals for the 4 years, the proprietary funds, which are the water, sewer, and sanitation primarily, will have earned over $48 million and benefited the general fund with transfers of more than $22 million. From the audited financial statements of the city for the fiscal year ended September 30, 2017, and I will mention that's the most current available since we have not finished fiscal year 2018 yet. From those audited financials, the general and other non-proprietary funds had cash balances in excess of $15 million and a total fund balance in excess of $35 million. Proprietary funds had a cash balance in excess of $31 million and a total fund balance in excess of $88 million. In summary, the balance sheets reviewed demonstrated a very strong financial position for the city, for which the city staff and council are to be commended. Here are a couple of things that the Texas Municipal League has to say about excess profits from proprietary funds, and I'm quoting from the TML. How much may cities charge as utility fees? Similar to user fees, generally utility fees must bear some relation to the actual cost of providing utility service. Utility billing is different from other fees in one important way, however, because it's long been recognized that cities may make a reasonable profit from operation of their utility system. The city can transfer the reasonable profit to the city's general fund, provided the amount complies with provisions of any debt instrument that is paid by the utility proceeds. A court may grant relief, however, to utility customers who can prove that a city's profit or return is unreasonable and excessive. Further quotes from the TML under a heading of transfer from other funds. Many cities operate utilities and other optional services that generate substantial gross revenues. By law, the fees for such services must closely offset the cost of providing the service. In addition to the cost factor, cities are permitted to retain a reasonable return, which can then be transferred to the general fund. This return amounts to less than 7% of overall city revenue. Just some quick conclusions. The city appears to be in extremely strong financial position. From everything I could analyze and from the data available to me, it is my opinion the utility fees of the city could very well be construed as unreasonable and excessive. It is my personal belief that the average citizen in Nacogdoches feels that when they pay their utility bill each month, it is payment for services rendered for water, sewer, and sanitation, not for the general operations of the city. In my opinion, if they knew the truth, they would not be too happy. Now, I tried to hold those to 3 minutes, and I have prepared a report which I have delivered to the City Council. Thank you.
Dr. Smith.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? How about, would anyone like to speak against the budget that's been proposed? Okay, hearing none. Public hearing is now closed. Ms. Curbo. Council, do you have any questions or comments for Ms. Curbo?
No, but as the doctor stated in his report, to review this and then ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this is the first time I've seen this report.
And we
so-
have another
and-
public hearing,
Yeah,
so
right.
that will be,
Thank
that would
you.
be fine. Okay, no one else? I do have a comment. I mentioned in our budget work session how disappointed I was that there were no money set aside for our parks this next year, our park system. And I really hate to see us lose that momentum. I also mentioned the idea, because there was no money budgeted for our parks, the idea of a development office, which would be one person that could seek to raise funds for community projects. Not just parks, but trails and anything that would benefit our community. So I would like to make a request that to see placeholders for finding some funding, if we can, to put into Parks Capital and perhaps a development office.
We'll make sure we get those entered and held for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Item number 7 is a public hearing. Consider ordinance amending boundaries of a zoning district within the city of Nacogdoches from R1 single-family residential to R2 single-family residential. Mr. Manti, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The rezoning case tonight is to rezone a property located along Appleby Sands Road, which is approximately 0.85 miles North Loop 224, right at the city edge. As you can see on the location map, it's right at the city edge. On the eastern side, we have the city's ETJ. The applicant wishes to rezone this property from R1, which is a single-family zoning district, to R2 single-family zoning district. Just to clear the confusion, both R1 and R2 allow for single-family residence. The only difference is the lot sizes. This property is it's approximately 15 acres. It's wooded, and the applicant proposes to have 60 lots on size. The average lot size will range between 6,500, and some of them are actually bigger than 6,500. But I think based on the concept plan provided, the minimum lot size will range around 6,500, which is quite bigger than the minimum requirements in the R2 zone. The applicant also proposes to provide an HOA to maintain some of the amenities that will be provided on site. And as staff believes, it's been a while since the city had any residential subdivision, and so we believe this proposal will be a good fit for the neighborhood. The current land use is vacant. To the north of it, we have vacant properties as well. To the southern border and the eastern, we have residences. And on the west side of this property is also residences. I would like to point out that there are well-established subdivisions around this property, and staff believes this proposal, if developed, should be able to match the character of the existing neighborhood. Staff has reviewed this proposal, and we believe it will not have any adverse impact on surrounding land users. I have a picture here showing the street of Appleby Sands, and have the property showing to the east of in this picture. The zoning of this property is zone R1. Surrounding land uses are zone R1 as well. The intended use is to rezone this from R1 to R2. The reduction in lot sizes, which is in the R2 from 8,250 square feet to 6,000 square feet, does not necessarily mean it's going to be smaller homes. I think the idea behind the R2 is to allow for equal single-family homes, but with smaller backyards. And based on assessment of this R2 zoning, the major differences between a home in the R1 and a home in the R2 would be the front and set backyards. So an R1 zone single-family home will probably have a bigger lot front yard or backyard as compared to an R2 zone. But in terms of development with regards to home sizes and setbacks and how things will be placed on site, staff does not believe this R2 zone would have any impact on surrounding zone within the city. There's also the need for the city to consider different housing choices. Most of the time, ever since I moved into the city, I've had a lot of discussions with developers. I've had discussions with citizens. And a typical example would be a medical doctor who has enough money to be able to purchase a house, probably a single person or just a newly married couple. They don't necessarily need a big backyard or a big front yard. Probably they will not have the time to maintain it. And so this R2 zoning is there to cater for these housing needs. It will allow for the creation of decent family homes, but with smaller smaller front yards or smaller backyards. And like I said, not everybody would have the time to maintain a bigger backyard. And so there's the need for the city and my department to consider various housing choices that will fit the needs of citizens within Nacogdoches. The future land use calls for this area to be single-family homes. The proposed zoning will be single-family homes and nothing other than single-family homes. One of the key goals of the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2003 says there's the need for the city to consider a variety of safe, high-quality residential areas that meets the needs of Nacogdoches residents. And the key word here is needs. So in current trends, there's the need to consider various housing choices. Some would want a house with big backyards. Some would want a decent family home, but a smaller backyard that they can maintain. But the underlying factor is all of these houses will be quality single-family homes that will maintain the character of the neighborhood. And the objective of this goal is to provide suitable areas for a variety of residential types and densities. I'm not showing my utility map, but we have utilities along this road, and so there's the need for development to go in to utilize this provided amenities and also to create some taxes for the city. I'm not showing any floodplain map because no part of this property lies within the 100 or 500-year floodplain. I have the side view showing the site is very wooded, and like I said earlier, it's surrounded by single-family homes, and this proposal is also for single-family homes, and I believe it will be a good fit for the neighborhood. Staff sent out 18 notices to property owners within 200-foot notification area. We received none in favor or none in opposition. We did have, however, receive phone calls from citizens, and we tried our best to explain to them that the only difference between this and the R1 zoning will be the difference in the front and side yards. I have a picture showing the south side from this property. I have a picture showing the west, the north, and the east. This is the preliminary site plan showing 60 lots. I also want to point out the fact that this preliminary site plan shows 60 lots. currently it is zoned R1. Should the applicant decide to default to the R1 zone, he can actually still develop 60 homes on the lot. The reason why staff thought the R2 would be a good use is the fact that given the chance to do the R2 zone would allow the applicant to maintain a lot of trees on site. The applicant plans to maintain a lot of perimeter trees on site, but if we decide to go with the I1 zone, then he will be forced to clear all those trees. And I think one of the goals of the comprehensive plan is to maintain the character of neighborhoods. As you drive along Appleby Sands Road, you realize that the trees give a unique character to the neighborhood. And so the R2 zone would allow for 60 lots, but would also allow for the preservation of a lot of trees. The applicant proposes to have walking trails on site, which we think is an addition to the subdivision. And so this R2 would allow for any of these. Should the applicant default to the R1 zone, I believe the minimum that he could actually fit in there would probably be about 55, which would be no different from what the R2 zone would allow. So now the question here is, do we want to see 60 lots with a nice landscape with preservation of trees, with good walking trails, and something that will make the area unique, or we want to see 60 lots on an R1 zone that will just be a row of houses? That is the issue for tonight, and so staff believes that there's the need to consider aesthetics, there's the need to consider the preservation of neighborhoods, and therefore the R2 zone will be a better fit for this neighborhood. Staff believes this proposal will not have any impact on surrounding zones, and we believe that it is consistent with the 2003 comprehensive plan. The key points to note that this lot reduction is from 8,250 to 6,000 square feet, but the concept plan actually shows the minimum to be 6,500. A reduction in lot sizes does not necessarily mean a reduction in home sizes. It only means a reduction in smaller backyards. And that is why normally when you drive through subdivisions, people decide to build two-story homes, others decide to build one-story homes. It depends on the market, and there's the need for staff to identify various housing needs. We should always consider the high-end income people and consider the medium-income residents. And this subdivision would actually allow for medium to high-income residences on site. And the development can still accommodate similar lot numbers with the current rezone. Even if it's R1, the applicant has the choice to develop as it is, but would have to go about and remove most of the trees on site. His proposal for some aesthetics in the subdivision will not be done if we go with the R1 zone. And so we believe the R2 will be an improvement for the subdivision. And it also allows for variety in housing choices and necessity in Nacogdoches. I've had a chance to talk to a lot of applicants and a lot of developers and citizens in the city, and the trend that we are facing in the city currently is the fact that those lots that were allocated for bigger homes are not being bought by citizens. People are now looking for high quality houses but with smaller backyards, and so we believe this R2 zoning, which allows for single family homes, will be a better fit for the neighborhood. Once again, the question at hand is either allow a 60 lot sizes with just row of houses, or similar lot numbers with aesthetics and preserving trees and making the area walkable and making it livable for the citizens within that community. This is my presentation to an end. I'll be willing to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Since this is a public hearing, is there anyone here that would like to speak against this zoning change for this planned development? Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak for the zoning change? Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilman. Excellent presentation. I think that it's a good idea, but my question has to do with why are we doing a piecemeal approach here? Why is it just that when a developer comes and says, oh, I want to redo my thing, we look at that as if it were in a vacuum, as opposed to saying, okay, if this area, if R2 is appropriate, maybe there's a more cohesive area that ought to be rezoned R2 and not just the lot that the developer has brought and do something that's a little bit more comprehensive and understandable and beneficial to Nacogdoches based on the realization of looking at the lots that have been brought forward. I think if you look at one of the larger views, there's an area all on one side of the street there that could probably all go to R2, and rather than bringing things up in a piecemeal, haphazard sort of fashion that's purely driven by the developer, I think Nacogdoches needs to start doing a little bit of driving of its own.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Okay. Anyone else that would like to speak for the zoning change? Okay. Hearing none. Council, any questions or comments for Mr. Manty?
Sure. That was a good job. I appreciate that. Are there any concerns going the R2 route instead of the master plan community route? It seems like there's not a whole lot of R2 up in that part of town.
Sure.
Is there any downside to going R2 that you can see?
What I've realized is in most city, apart from the R2, most of the other zoning was for a planned development, which looks more like a master plan community. The reason why I wouldn't recommend the R2 in that zone is why I wouldn't recommend the planned development is, to me, that is my opinion. Planned development actually gives the developers the option to request a lot from the city, and they don't usually give back as compared to what they receive. So the planned development can actually give the developer the option to reduce the lot sizes less than 6,000. It gives them the option to actually reduce the street size, and it goes through a whole lot of process. But the R2 basically restricts them to the minimum size of 6,000 square feet, which is quite closer to the 8,250 square feet. So that is why I believe the R2 will be a better fit than actually sitting down for a planned development.
Gotcha. Thank you. Going to Mr. Phillips' comment, if you were to, with a broad stroke, make a lot of that section, a lot of that area up there R2, what are the downsides of that? Is that they get piecemealed out and you have a lot of 6,000 square foot lots just spotted along Appleby Sand, or does it make more sense for us to, as developers come along, can we make it more of a cohesive effort by granting those piece by piece?
I think what I've seen in other cities that I've worked is city council gave the option that if any developer wants to rezone to any other zone that will benefit the city and to encourage development, then they can give incentives such as waiving the zoning fees or setting incentives to developers for them to rezone to R2. But since the lands are owned by individuals, as a city, we cannot communicate how they should be rezoned. But if we go ahead, if we encourage them to do such R2 within the neighborhood, I think it will go a long way to benefit the city. And of course, we plan as a city to expand into our ETJs and stuff like that. And I believe the R2 will be a better fit for such areas as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
A lot of the property that's within this area is private owned.
Sure.
And in the R1 that's already there.
Sure.
I would like to think most of those would like to leave it as R1.
Sure.
Mainly because it's handed down for family tradition or whatever. And they want to build a larger structure, and R1 would fit into what they need.
Exactly, I agree. That is why I said it's for private owners. And so as a city, we will not make that option, or we will not take a step to rezone to R2. We would only look at every land case by case, and if it fits into the R2 requirement, then we can work with them. If not, I think the I1 will still be in place.
In the preliminary site plan, did you mention that there was going to be a walkability?
Well, the applicant, and this has to do with, let me be very specific on here.
Mainly because I have a problem with cutting trees down.
Sure. And with regards to tree preservation, that is why we thought the R2 would be a better fit, because the applicant can actually decide to increase the lot sizes, and that would mean removing all the trees around, most of the trees on site. But if we allow for the 6,000 square feet, then he can actually work around preserving most of the trees on site. I've talked to the applicant. I've seen some of the development he has done in town, and I've seen what he has done with tree preservation. So I wouldn't say I trust him 100%, but I'm confident that he will do stuff related to that.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time following the logic between smaller lots equals more trees. I don't know how that works out. And let me tell you, I did a basic calculation, and I just said we got 60 lots times whatever the frontage, average frontage was for R2, and I came up with so many feet of street, and then I just divided by that by the greater lot width for a R1 zoning, and came up with 48 lots.
Sure.
And so obviously that's not a rock solid calculation, but typically what you do on one of these is you try to minimize street frontage to the minimum lot size so that the cost of infrastructure per lot is the minimum possible. And when I look at this, I see all of these lots are the same width. Not all of them, but most of them are the same width. And it doesn't logically, I don't understand how you can get to the idea if we have more smaller lots, we're going to have more trees left over. I don't know how that's going to work.
Well, I think if we are talking about 6,000 square feet as compared to 8,250 square feet. So let's take a single lot of 6,000 square feet and the excess of 2,500 square feet. So let's say there are 6 trees on site on 82,050 square feet, and the applicant plans to build on that 8250 square feet with 6 trees. He can be forced to clear all those 6 trees. But if he's built on a 6,000 square feet with 6 trees, then he can actually maintain about 1 or 2 because he's actually reducing his building footprint. The lot size. He's actually reducing the area of development. So just take a single site, 8250 with 6 trees, and then 6,000 square feet with 6 trees. Your building. Your development size has reduced, and so the impact on trees will be lesser on the 6,000 square feet as compared to building on the 8,250 square feet.
I don't follow that. I mean, say if you're going to build a 2,000 square foot footprint.
Sure.
In one case, it goes on a 6,000 foot lot. The other, it goes on an 8,000 square foot lot. It's a larger percentage of that is consumed on the smaller lot. I mean, if you drive around and look at subdivisions, when they have large lots versus small lots, the small lot typically has less maintained vegetation. I mean, I really can't. I don't understand how that works.
Well, if you look at the issue of the concept of garden homes, which I believe this lot sizes.
Are you going to build smaller houses? Is that what you're saying?
No, garden home does not necessarily mean smaller homes. It means a smaller developable area with more green spaces. So that is what I'm perceiving this lot size to be. When the issue of garden homes, you see, the definition of a smaller home can be relative depending on the location of where that what the subdivision is and what the ideals are. And like I said, an 8,250 square feet, let's say a 3,000 square feet home in Nacogdoches might be smaller in certain areas. So with regards to the size of the home, it's relative depending on the location of that subdivision. But in my opinion, if you are providing smaller lots, it gives you the option to do more preservation. It gives you the option to preserve more trees on the side. That is based on my opinion.
Let me intervene here. I believe you said earlier that the trees would be preserved on the perimeter.
The applicant plans doing that.
Well, they're not shown preserved on the perimeter.
Okay, but they may not be. But that's what I remember him saying. So I don't know if that makes a
Yeah,
difference.
he plans to do a lot of preservation along the perimeter trees. He plans to do a lot of it.
Okay.
Well, that's not what's shown on the plan.
This is just a preliminary site plan. And I also want to point out the fact that even if this rezone is approved and during the planning stages the applicant doesn't meet our requirements, then we as a city staff will not approve any developments on the site. So this is just the preliminary stages. This site plan would go through a lot of engineering review, planning review, and so many other stuff. So the rezoning does not necessarily mean the applicant has the freedom to start building or everything is done. This site plan will go through a lot of reviews before it even goes to the construction stages.
Okay.
Well, this is the way I looked at it when I looked at it this afternoon, and I'm admittedly my calculations. It's not like I sat down and relayed out the subdivision, but if you do that calculation, based on frontage of the street, you figure out he gets approximately 12 more lots than under R1 zoning at the base level, 48 versus 60. And one of the things that I've always talked about, not so much since I've been on the council, but before I got here, is the importance of preserving the character of our roadways. And Appleby Sand Road is one of those roadways that has always, it's starting to get developed now, but it's not completely developed. So if we had a 100-foot buffer zone at the front of the site, he would lose between 2 and 4 lots, depending how it got laid out. And we'd have, so as you were driving down the road, you would see basically what you see now, as opposed to seeing houses built right along there. And in exchange for based on my calculation, going from R1 to R2, we would still pick up, at least 8 new lots, and we would also have a 100-foot native buffer zone along Appleby Sand Road in an attempt to preserve the character of that roadway. That was the logic. I still don't follow the logic to me of smaller lots equals more trees. I don't see how that works.
I agree. Smaller lot does not. Of course, you can have the trees are not probably evenly scattered, so it's on a case by case basis. But I was just trying to give an analysis of 8250 lot with 6 trees on it and building on probably half of that lot. You realize that if you are using half of that lot, you can actually preserve 4 of the trees if you want to build half of the lot. So in that same way, that is how I was calculating it. So yeah,
that's and I guess that's what we're supposed to do is discuss this stuff. But if you went back and relayed those street layout is going to be like the street layout, because that's just the nature of that tract of land. And so the difference would be is the lot widths would be greater under an R1 and they'd be less under R2. And so one case is you have 15 acres and you have 60 houses. The other one you have 15 acres and you have 48 houses. And I can't follow the argument where with 60 houses you're going to preserve more of the natural character of the land than if you build 12 more houses on the same amount of land. That just doesn't compute to me. So
we actually did. They actually sat down with the applicants, and he did present a plan with the with the R1 zone, and we actually got more than 48 houses. Like I said, site design is subjective. Your street layouts can determine the number of trees. How you want to build your detention facility can determine the number of lots. So you probably got 48 based on your calculations, but I believe the applicant showed us something different. Like I said, knowing engineering, design is more of a subjective thing. So I agree with your 48, but the applicant also did give us something different. So
the detention pond would also get bigger with it. So.
Yeah.
I think the concept, the big picture here is the concept of preserving the character along Appleby Sand Road, while the applicant can still get more lots than he can under the zoning, would be a reasonable trade-off for changing that zoning, because that zoning is not surrounded by the same zoning.
Sure.
Because all the zoning around it is R1, so this would be an island of more intense zoning than what is surrounding it. So it would be, in effect, a development rights bonus. We're giving more development rights to the developer than what currently exists there.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve R1 zoning with a 100-foot native buffer offset from the property line with right-of-way with Appleby Sand Road.
Okay. You said you wanted to approve R1 zoning.
R2, excuse me, R2 zoning
The 100 foot.
100 foot
Stipulation.
buffer zone.
Okay.
That's,
Which
I don't know if
I
anybody
would
else
tend
wants
to
to do
agree.
it, but that's my motion.
Okay.
I will second that motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Would you go back to the picture of where the lot is located? Doesn't it go in between two lots to get back to the?
Yes.
So there are no houses in that area, so that, in that little entrance?
So I think in this case, the buffer zone will be for the property along Appleby Sands, and that would apply to just his portion, and not the entire stretch.
Right.
Just
It's
his
the part-
portion.
we can't-
It looks like from their site plan, that would only at most eliminate 2 lots.
Sure.
2 lots, maybe
Sure.
4.
Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion?
And so that's a native buffer zone, meaning like leave the trees the way they are, don't cut them all down and then re-landscape it.
Great.
Just-
Yeah, with a condition.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I may.
Yes,
If-
that's fine. So,
With
So we're
regard
stating
to
it.
that motion, Councilmember Moore, if it was, if the motion was made, it might be a little, possibly more proper if it was approved with condition that, and then what you had talked about.
So when the subdivision got recorded, it would have a line along there, which would be in effect a conservation easement or some other mechanism on the plat that would show that that area could not be disturbed, except for the entryway. Obviously, the roadway that goes in would go in there, but the offset from the property line between Appleby Sand Road right-of-way and the land itself. Does that make any sense?
Well, I can't say that it would be a conservation easement, no, sir. I can't
Well-
say that at all. With regard to our framework on what our ordinance sets forth, on how we go, our code sets forth, we either we approve with condition, we deny with prejudice, or we deny without prejudice generally.
Okay.
So the framework would be if there's an approval, but with a condition, and that condition would have to you can impose additional reasonable conditions which are necessary to protect the public interest and welfare of the community. If that's what you're proposing, it would need to be an approval with this condition that you're speaking of.
I'm sure that you can figure all that legal stuff, but the bottom line is when they get through developing, there's a bunch of houses, and on the front, there's a bunch of undisturbed land. That's the outcome we're proposing. You know, however you want to write, there's probably more than one way to legally write that up, but I'm sure there's at least one.
Yes, sir. Well, with all due respect, it's your motion.
Mhm.
It's just so that it would be a proper motion
Okay,
under our
thank you.
framework. and
Okay,
it would
then
be approved with the condition, and you state what condition you feel would be.
That there be a 100-foot native buffer zone along Appleby Sand Road. That's the condition.
I have a couple of concerns. One is we are running out of space to build for new homes in this area of town.
Sure.
And so I'm taking that into account, but also the possibility that if the developer does not agree to this condition, then he keeps it at R1, and then we lose more of that buffer, what he's talking about, or the trees in that way. How much space is that on Appleby Sand Road? I mean, do you happen to know? Just it's for an entrance. It's a street.
About 400 feet.
Okay.
A street width.
And
No, it's here. It's all along there. The street goes in and splits, so here's Appleby Sand Road.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So, see, these aren't even lots anyway, and
Right.
you lose those 2 lots right there, and maybe, you know, so.
And Councilman Moore, if you don't mind me asking, with this condition, I feel like I actually giving him a condition that other developments haven't met within the subdivision.
Well, so
And in our that is from my perspective. We need to be fair to all developments within the city. So if
well,
we
I
are,
certainly think on all future development along Appleby Sand Road, we should have a buffer zone. I agree with that.
because the well-established subdivision, which is well-established, I don't think they have that buffer zone, and so putting that condition on this development, I think it looks like we are just trying to take them out of the crowd and put in special conditions on them. So
You're welcome to that opinion. I
Okay.
mean, that is true. That we haven't done that before. It would be a first time that we tried to preserve the natural character of the roadway.
okay.
If that's important, then we will go for it. If it's not important, we won't.
Because one of the things the applicant plans to do is to preserve all the trees along the perimeter. So whether we allow for this buffer zone or not, he has promised to maintain the perimeter trees. So I thought that would have been a good buffer along the street. So, okay. But I humbly respect your condition.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I had one question for
Yes.
Leo. Would this, what we're discussing now, the potential of a buffer zone, be something that would fit potentially in a more robust tree ordinance, which I know is something that you have looked at?
Exactly. It will fit into it. But a typical example would be, let's say the city does not have a sidewalk ordinance, and then a developer comes in to build something nice. I wouldn't say something nice. Comes in to build something, and then we impose sidewalk on that development. That is where I am arguing from. So.
Right. If we had
Sure.
that in place
Then
as
it
an
should apply
ordinance,
to everybody
then
within.
there's no question
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Discussion is finished. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. So, did you vote?
Wait a minute. When he said
Well,
aye,
we're
that
saying
threw me
no.
off.
I know.
Okay.
All those opposed?
Was that a no?
Please.
A no
yeah.
for me.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So, show of hands for no, against, and a show of hands for. Okay. Motion does not pass. So there is an opportunity for another motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item number 7 as written.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Not. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manty. Agenda item number 8, receive Nacogdoches Economic Development Corporation Program of Work. I'm Ms. Philpott.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight for the second half of what I presented to you 2 weeks ago. This is our program of work for the upcoming year. First off, I will say thank you to the many members of NEDCO that are here tonight. I started writing their names down so I could thank them individually, and I will not do that because I think several of them came in late. So I will ask all the NEDCO members just to raise their hands so that we can thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate that. We went through several of these things last week, so I will not repeat them, but ask you to please stop me if you have any questions about anything. First off, we're going to just go through broadly what our focus for 2018-2019 will be. A new item to the list will be a revision of our strategic plan. This was last done in 2015. We are hoping to revise that and add a few things, take off a few things that we think we've accomplished. We hope to coordinate with the city and the county and the CVB and the chamber with some strategic planning efforts. If that doesn't happen this year with those groups, we can postpone that. We want to just make sure that we have a coordinated county-wide effort on some strategic planning. Of course, retention and growth of our existing businesses. We want to water our native species and water what grows well here. attraction of new businesses, that's recruitment of our new businesses. Those are the ones that get the big, sexy headlines. And then establishment and support of a technical training center. So our major tasks coming up. I will admit to you it is somewhat daunting when you are asked to explain what you're going to do for 365 days coming up. So know that these are our big highlights, and that you are always welcome to check in with me and find out what's happened recently at NEDCO. The Entrepreneurship and Business Accelerator Academy, we are kicking off again this fall. We are doing our Entrepreneurship Academy. Scott Boyer, I did see, is in the audience, and I do have to thank him, as well as two of our council members here tonight that are on that committee. We are excited because we do have lots of community members that come and help teach that class, and I think it's a very successful class. We always end up with several new businesses that are successful, I think, due to that class. We are also kicking off some business development workshops, which will be in early 2019. These are slightly different than the Accelerator Academy. The Academy is a couple weeks long. These are just one-shot classes. So one we have thought of is how to open a restaurant. We get that question a lot. There's a lot that goes into opening a restaurant, from health inspections and building permitting, and plus all of the business planning type things. So we're going to try to coordinate that with the Chamber of Commerce. Also, how to work with the city, the county, SFA, TxDOT, how to contract with a governmental agency. That's daunting, but that's also something that we have a lot of opportunity in our community with large employment with the city and the county and the state. So we're hopeful that we can open that door to more of our local businesses. Continue to refine our target industries and retailers using our demographic and our market data to identify who we are a good fit for. Something that Jim Jeffers and I talk about is it's difficult to identify that target industry and retailer before they find us, because if they're doing their homework, we're probably on their list by the time we contact them. Development of additional marketing materials, so products that inform about Nacogdoches, products that tell somebody that we are more than a city in the woods, that we are a metropolitan, culturally diverse center of workforce in the East Texas region, and that we are on I-69, which will be here soon, and we are a place to build a business. Purchase and population of an economic development suite. I mentioned this to you all at my last presentation. This is Executive Pulse is the name of the software. We're looking forward to utilizing this. It's kind of an industry standard. Something I'm very much looking forward to out of this is development of a scorecard that I hope I will be able to present to you at the next council meeting, or at the next annual report. Sorry, not next council meeting. And this would allow us to identify our direct recruits, our number of active economic development agreements, the number of business academy attendees that we have, number of business touches. So several times a day or a week, Mary Frances, Bradford, Ashley Morgan, or myself have meetings with businesses, have contacts with businesses, assisting them, learning more about them. And so with this software, we'll be able to track that a little bit better and give you a better number on how many folks we work with on a daily basis. Collaboration with SFA. I've been working with Craig Turnage with the Alumni Association on how we can attract more alumni back to Nacogdoches. We have several, or I won't say several, we have a multitude of very, very successful SFA graduates with shockingly large, successful businesses that we think would be very, very important assets to Nacogdoches. And so Mr. Turnage and I are working on those connections, because what is good for SFA is good for Nacogdoches and vice versa. Memorial Hospital, we're going to continue to monitor their situation and assist however we can. Tonight, they do have a very important board meeting that is going on. We have several members there already, and I will give a caveat. Most of the time, when myself and my board members attend a city council meeting, we stay through to the end, and I'll warn you tonight, you may see some slip out to go attend that hospital meeting after my presentation. Coordination with NISD. The NISD school board has proposed a bond coming up, and part of that bond is proposing a magnet technical high school. How that would interact with adult education is still up for discussion, and so NEDCO is going to do everything we can to ensure that both our high school students as well as our adults receive adequate technical training. Collaboration with our area school districts, not just in ISD. Mary Frances and myself have been meeting with our area county ISD superintendents discussing their needs, and something that popped up because often in a very small community the superintendent is the is the official that speaks for that community. They may not have a mayor or a city council, and something that popped up a lot was adult education, things like ESL classes for adults, and so we'll continue that collaboration. Our Angelina Nacogdoches County manufacturing partnerships will continue work. We are focusing right now on the NEDCO end on access to capital. Our smaller businesses that are looking to grow and have major growth opportunities, as well as recruiting their executive level and maybe mid-level managers. That's something that we have heard that they're struggling with, and so we're hoping to assist them with that, as well as industrial growth, recruiting new industry and helping our existing industries grow. And with that, I will open it up for public discussion and remain here for questions.
Are there any public comments about this presentation? Okay, hearing none. Council, any questions or comments for Ms. Philpott?
Just on the business side, attracting different businesses. Mm-hmm. And I had a note here about home business that we would like to come to Nacogdoches. I mean, I'm pretty sure we have met with those businesses before, and they desired to go somewhere else. What was the reason? What's the most reasons that they use not to come to Nacogdoches?
When they, I'm trying to think, there's a very specific example that I can think of that has been pretty recent. That particular company was offered a very lucrative economic incentive package that, I will be honest, I don't know that Nacogdoches was capable of fulfilling. Others have been, we do struggle, just like in the discussion about homes previously, we do struggle with existing industrial sites. It is difficult to find a site that meets some of these criteria that we see, such as rail service or just a flat site that's ready to be built on in the next 6 months. And so ready to turn dirt, I would say, is an important criteria. Something that I'm hoping to work with the City Council on in the coming years and months is utility access. The sites, we do have sites that might be flat, they might have rail access, but they don't have water and sewer availability yet. And so it is my goal, and I believe the NEDCO board's goal in the next several years, to make sure that when I-69 is here, that we are ready to respond quickly when businesses want to come and locate on I-69.
But you mentioned sites, but countywide, I'm sort of, I wonder, I mean, countywide, we should have plenty of sites for any type of business. I mean, maybe if somebody wanted their business as to being home-based and maybe not the manufacturing part of it, or maybe not the like warehousing. I mean, we should have plenty of areas to establish a large warehouse.
As far as home-based businesses go, I think we are an ideal market because those are folks that are looking for a strong quality of life, and because they can locate anywhere. As far as even something like a warehouse, I received a request for proposals for a warehouse just last week that was looking for a 300,000 square foot space, or 300,000 square foot building. That is quite a lot of acreage. And when we look outside the city limits of Nacogdoches, suddenly we don't have the water capability or the electrical capabilities. And so it's really a matter of expanding our infrastructure, even to some of our sites inside the city limits, not necessarily looking at moving outside the city limits, but making sure that we're filling in all of those gaps.
Thank you.
You mentioned on the manufacturing partnership that we're providing access to capital. How do we do that, and where's the capital coming from?
We are, I did meet with one of our manufacturers yesterday to talk about this, and the opportunity zones that I've mentioned to you several times, I think is a huge new opportunity. It's essentially directing capital that traditionally has been on the coasts, has been on the East Coast and the West Coast, to places like Nacogdoches. And we've actually already started getting some calls and some interest from people who want to invest in an opportunity fund, and those funds have to be invested in places like Nacogdoches.
And do I understand correctly, they're still waiting on some rulings on how that has to play out?
Yes, the IRS was supposed to release those in the summer, and we are rapidly reaching the end of summer, so we are hoping that we will hear those rules in the fall.
And do we have a deadline for how long that was put into play? Do we have a couple of years, or is it just through?
I believe initially it was a 10-year program, but if it is successful, it could be extended. It's all dependent on the tax bills that Congress passes.
Awesome, thank you.
And were those for rural areas?
They were for areas that had economic depression, so areas that had low income or other issues. They also were areas that specifically requested it, and Nacogdoches and as well as much of East Texas requested to be designated.
One of the conversations we've had year after year is how to attract higher paying jobs. How do you correlate that with how you're trying to find businesses?
I would correlate that definitely with technical training. Being able to show a business that we have not only trained citizens, but we have the ability to train citizens based on a new business's needs. I think that is very important. I think it's also important to be selective about who we are looking at and who we are recruiting. Warehousing is an easy example of utilizing I-69 and not utilizing a lot of infrastructure, but it's also not an incredibly high-paying type business. And so I think being selective on who we recruit and who is interested in us, I think that's how you solve that issue.
No, I agree that a training school would be a real boon to our city. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Might as well stay there.
Thank you. Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
going to let you do
One
the
more
next
item.
one too. Yeah. Consider number 9. Consider Nacogdoches Economic Development Corporation professional service contract.
This is a very simple item. We did not change anything substantially from last year. We renamed the, I believe it used to be called a marketing plan. We renamed that program of work because a marketing plan is just a very small part of what NEDCO does. This is a contract for $95,000 annually, and that's paid in quarterly payments to the city. A question that I've received in the past is how the reimbursement works for employment, and those are completely separate transactions. The city pays NEDCO its quarterly payments, and NEDCO pays the city back on a monthly basis for employment. And there is also a separate employment contract, which will come back to you in December.
Okay. Are there any comments from the public about the contract with NEDCO? Okay, hearing none. Council, any questions or comments about the contract? Okay, if not, Chair would entertain a motion for approval.
Motion to approve agenda item number 9.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not?
Let me just ask one question.
Yes.
I'm still learning about the budget, still studying on it, and we have an economic development fund, and we're transferring what, $400,000 to it this year or something like
I
that.
believe it's 150 a year.
159.
150,000.
Okay. And how does that what's the difference between our economic development and NEDCO? How do those two interface with each other?
That's a great question. The $150,000 fund, which if it is funded again this year, would be a balance of $300,000. That was intended to emulate the fund that 4A, 4B sales tax supported cities have. A question earlier was why would we lose somebody that was interested in us and those cities utilize 4A, 4B sales tax? And so this is to develop that war chest, as it's called, to help better recruit and better incentivize businesses.
Does NEDCO oversee that fund, or does somebody else in the city oversee that?
The city council and the city manager oversees that fund. Jim and I, in our discussions, have discussed that NEDCO would perform an advisory role in how those funds and recommend to the city council and to the city manager how those funds be utilized. Jim and I believe in the future we'll be coming back to you with an economic development policy which would outline a better use of those funds.
Have you already started working on that?
Yes.
Can you share that with us before you bring it to us for a vote?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, usually we get stuff, 4 days ahead of time, and it's like...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we need to vote on this. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Number 10, consider the Nacogdoches Convention and Visitors Bureau proposed fiscal year 2019 budget and marketing plan. Ms. Morgan, good to see you this evening.
Nice seeing you too. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Okay. So, this is a really interesting time right now for us in travel and tourism because we're seeing some of our supporting industries, oil and gas specifically, that's been in such a downfall recently on the precipice of recovery, and that means good things for us here in Nacogdoches. And the other thing that's happening, it's unprecedented. The trends in travel and tourism that we see in our reports from the governor's office, who invests a lot of money and time and research in researching into visitor profiles and seeing who exactly is coming to Texas and why. Well, now they are looking for what's known as experience. We're in an experience-based economy. So in the 70s and 80s, a lot of business was going overseas. And to sort of entice people to buy American, we were in more of a guarantee and warranty economy. So buy American, we'll give you extended warranty, and we guarantee this work. Then we moved in to the 80s and the 90s and even today to a customer service-based economy. Hold the pickle, hold the lettuce, special orders, don't upset us. Even today, if you go through the drive-thru at Chick-fil-A, ask for some grape jelly, it is going to be their pleasure. Rock the world, ask for some picante. So now we've evolved into what is known as this experience-based economy, which is a culmination of those customer service moments. And that's something that people in Nacogdoches have been doing this thing without even knowing it's a thing to do. So that means if they go to Heart of Texas, to Jerry Larrabee, they're going to experience excellent customer service. If they go see Mr. Wood at the antique shop, again, excellent customer service. If they come to the Charles Bright Visitor Center and experience Mike Bay, outstanding customer service. All of those culminate in this experience that has them walking away feeling like, I want to come back there. And that is what everybody else in Texas is trying to establish. We have it organically. So we are well positioned to be successful. Our mission and purpose hasn't changed at all. We exist to position Nacogdoches as a historic destination by attracting overnight visitors and positively affecting the city's economy. One of our focuses this year is going to be on brand positioning, and brand goes beyond a logo. That, in fact, is a very small component of what a brand is. It describes what sets us apart. How are we different from everybody else that's trying to get these same people to come stay in their hotels? And through some public inquiry, we have a positioning statement that positions us in 3 words: historic, beautiful, and charming. So the audience that we want to speak to, we've broken down into 5 different groups. So we've got the modern family, which has your conventional, traditional family, your non-traditional family, and multi-generational people. We see more and more trends that 3 generations of families are traveling at one time. So it's important for a destination to have something that's of interest and value to children, to parents, and grandparents as well. Past as present refers to our history buffs, of which we have a plethora of history to offer them, and the concept of positioning ourselves as a hub and spoke. So not only do we have a lot of history here in Nacogdoches, we're also adjacent to a lot of history. So if we can position those people to spend the night in our hotels and then take day trips, that's what hub and spoke refers to. And then highlighting our historic preservation, because that's something that's happening right now. It's happened all along. It's never not been a thing here, but it is still alive and well, as seen in the Zion Hill project.
Perfect Planners addresses trying to get meeting planners to bring small meetings here to Nacogdoches, for corporate to bring their retreats here. We'll talk more about that later. Hometown Host, encouraging our residents to invite their friends and family to come see why they've chosen Nacogdoches and to see the vacation value of East Texas. And then the Great Outdoors, and again, that involves ZipNac, our great trails, our wonderful parks, and that hub and spoke concept. All of that audience can be broken down into 4 different markets. So we have leisure travel, which accounts for the majority of our visitation here, meetings and events, sports, and local. We're looking to move the needle. So in 2017, travel and tourism accounted for the addition of $2.6 million in local tax receipts for Nacogdoches County, and that was up over 15% from the previous year. Total direct travel spending, and that includes the hotel and lodging stays, added $80.1 million to the local economy, and that was up 13% from the previous year. And all indicators show that 2018 will outperform even that. So with thoughtful and prescribed marketing and messaging efforts, we can expedite and maximize that growth. For leisure travel, there's some pretty words. I worked hard on that. But we'll go more in depth in the objectives. To address this leisure market, we're going to put people first. We're going to provide meaningful and personalized connections. We've got some strategies there. Further develop and implement Charlie Doches, who's our pet ambassador, to further cement Nacogdoches as a pet-friendly destination. Actively encourage visitor reviews on social media, Google, TripAdvisor, Yelp, and any other platform that utilizes user-generated content. And continue to curate and promote interesting and relevant itineraries for those people that choose us. We're going to focus on presenting the story first. We are the story keepers and we are the storytellers of Nacogdoches. And so we're going to use that to our advantage because we are rich in history, we're rich in stories. And we're going to use that in our marketing efforts and in our messaging to not only tell people, to use that to expound upon why people should come here. And then finally, results. In past marketing plans that I was able to observe that had been in place by the CVB, there were some firm numbers put on that. Traditionally, that's not how marketing plans work, just because it's not the nature of our business. So ours is more about establishing relationships with meeting planners. And any of you that sit on any boards, you know that those meetings are 2 years out. So we could be doing a lot of work to get people here, and for leisure travel specifically, it might not be in their budget. You know, maybe they plan to take a Disney cruise and they've been saving for that. So we can make those impressions on them through a Texas Monthly ad, but they might not be able to visit here for years down. So these are our KPIs, our key performance indicators. That's how we're going to measure. So we are going to measure, we're going to monitor, we're going to measure, and then we're going to adjust accordingly. I can't read that. Unique web visits, visitor information requests, visitor center counts, our social media, check-ins and logins, tours and events that we organize, our occupancy, call to action response, and our marketing and visitor response. Meeting events takes on a similar tone, except this time we're putting the planners first. Again, creating those personalized, meaningful connections with those meeting planners so that we can identify specific needs of this group. We can't really service large groups, but what we can do is service smaller groups really, really well. And story first, again, the destination storytelling is an emphasis. Another emphasis that we're going to do, we're going to focus on increasing our video content across all platforms, specifically in meetings and events. It's expensive to travel these days. It's expensive to travel here. We're not the easiest destination to get here by plane. So if we can invest some time and energy in doing 360-degree photography of Mast Hall so that we can take the experience and use technology to our advantage and present that to meeting planners in a usable format that they can still stay in their home and still see what we have to offer. They're not getting the full experience, but hopefully they'll get enough information to encourage them to come for a site visit. And then our results, our KPIs here, that's going to be what we're monitoring: site visits, FAM tour bookings, room pickups, group bookings, lead generation, and leads converted to bookings. Sports, it's been something that we've been trying to build for a long time. Certainly predates my arrival here. Still kind of waiting for the infrastructure of the city to come back up so that we can capitalize on that. A great example recently in Center, they hosted the World Series of baseball. Or youth baseball, Dixie League. There was a ball and some bats and some kids. But Center, and Center has a lot of hotels. They couldn't hold all of that business, and so we even saw the spillover here in Nacogdoches from that. Well, we could be that. And we're not that far away with the addition of the lights on the field and park. So, it's going to take some continued investment for us to get that kind of business. But while we wait, we need to get ready, because when it comes, we want to be prepared. So what we're doing is we're looking at what we do organically, naturally, that low-hanging fruit. Disc golf, for whatever reason, is really huge here. So we're capitalizing on that and bringing more of it and expanding that. Antique cars are really a big pull for us, too, and that's sports adjacent maybe, but it was the closest fit to where it was. But antique car owners and vintage collectors really enjoy our charm, and they love parking their cars on our downtown square and coming around and eating at Dolly's. And so we're going to focus on servicing those groups. Again, people first, story first, results first. And those KPIs: site visits, room pickups, group bookings, bids generated, and bids that convert to actual bookings. Local is probably the thing that's the most exciting for me. So we're really going to look at educating our community, which it doesn't take a lot, because this community, if they don't understand anything else, they understand the value of tourism and the importance of it. But what we're going to do is use this opportunity to really expand and create an ambassador program so that we can train people to speak in the tone and the voice and help us in telling the story in a manner that's consistent with what we're already putting out there in our marketing and our messaging. So we want to elevate the value of the Nacogdoches CVB, its partners in tourism, to the local community, increase the local community's awareness of the economic value of tourism and meetings, emphasizing the importance of Visit NAC and its strategic partnership as an economic driver. There's a lot of confusion, and it's hard unless you do it every day. Most people's assumption is that the CVB is funded with city money out of the general fund. They don't understand the nuances of hotel occupancy tax and how that can be used in its restricted use. And that's something that that onus falls on us to help educate them. So we're going to work on educating the public on exactly where that money is going and how we're reinvesting it to benefit them. We're going to educate civic groups, agencies, and the community of our services through local media opportunities and public speaking, engage the community in all levels, and collect testimonials and feedback. We want to empower local residents and business leaders to increase their own economic impact, incrementally increase economic impact through the increased meetings held locally as a result of local marketing and partnerships. So we want to share educational and training resources and opportunities, provide easily accessed tools and resources to them, cultivate authentic relationships with them, check in, pitch out where we can. We're all partners. And hospitality. Service matters. It's the most important thing out there. And that's something that we do well and that we can do more of. Increase customer service quality, service standards, and NAC knowledge to the frontline tourism employees and preferred partners. And this is where it gets into having active ambassador training. So organize a training program wherein twice a year we invite hotel staff, service station staff, restaurant staff, dining staff, where they can come in, because the worst thing that can happen is if you have a family go to a restaurant and sit down and ask their server, what's there to do in this town? And they say, nothing. That's the death knell, and we want to avoid that at all costs because it's not true. There's ample things to do. Our KPIs there for that local is our training participants, increase in volunteers, and visitor feedback. This is a SWOT map. We looked at our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And I included this just so that you know that these weren't decisions that we entered into willy-nilly. There are some reasons behind why we're choosing to do what we're doing and in the manner. These were, on Friday I just got updated marks. So these are some lines. These are a chart of our hotel occupancy. We have been blessed by having increasing hotel occupancy for this past fiscal year. For June, we were up 12% over this time last year. July's numbers surpassed even that, up 17%. It's a big deal. There's some pretty stuff. In advertising and marketing, we did send our marketing out to an RFP in the spring to 3 qualifying local advertising agencies. Hancock was awarded that bid again by the board of directors. And we have adopted, and you have a sticker in front of you, our campaign this year is We Have a Knack for That. Cute. This is what it looks like. These are our 2 first ads. So the one on the left, it's a full-page ad appearing in the October Texas Highways, and it tells the Zion Hill story, faithfully preserving history. Well, we have a knack for that. And the other appeared in a Texas Association of CVB's Meeting Planners Guide, looking for unique meeting spaces. Guess what? We've got a knack for that. Super cute. We poured through the analytics to see and hone down. We know who we're talking to. We're talking to those modern families, meeting planners, locals. What are we going to talk to them about? What is piquing their interest? And this is what has shown up, the top 5. They want to come to us for history. They like our nature, they like our arts and culture, they like our unique retail and antique shopping, and they like our unique meeting and conference spaces and opportunities there. Print presence is going to be in Texas Monthly, Texas Highways, Sawdust, County Line, and we're also researching other opportunities as well. We're kind of limited as to our budget, so if we do see increased revenue over and above what we've budgeted for and anticipated, we will reinvest a portion of that in marketing, just so that we can really take advantage of this time that we have in history where we are just poised. At this point, you couldn't spend too much money in marketing. Also continue with our digital presence and expand that. We're going to continue to market specifically to group sales. The board approved the purchase of some new software for Joanna Temple, who's our director of sales, to help identify some leads that every other CVB isn't getting right now. So we've found this group that focuses more on corporate that isn't being hit up by other communities right now. So we're hoping that pays off. We're also looking at how we service the groups that come in. Do they want goodie bags? Do they want name tags? What kind of name tags do they want? Do they want help with registration, et cetera? And we're looking to focus that so that we can have a tier program. So if you're going to give us X number of room nights, this is what you qualify for in terms of servicing. And the more room nights you provide, obviously, the more that you qualify for. Our coordinator of visitor service is Mr. Mike Bay, and he is being elevated to be our local Visit Nacogdoches brand ambassador. And his primary roles are inventory, evaluation, and management of our gift shop. So he's deciding what we sell and making sure that we're turning in our receipts and that we're listening to visitor requests for what we're supplying. He's our visitor experience manager, so during azalea season, when the River Oaks Country Club wants to come see the azaleas, it's Mr. Bay that is organizing that, and there is no finer person to do that. Volunteer supervisor, and then office and building manager. And Mike is going to be working in conjunction with me to help craft this ambassador program, because it will, in fact, be called Be Like Mike, because if we could scientifically clone the man, we would. And it would be money well spent. But we're going to suffice with just doing a big brain dump and getting all of his knowledge. He's still not allowed to go anywhere. The focus for the visitor service for fiscal year 2019 is on increasing the quality and diversity of products sold and implementing the ambassador training program, including appreciation and recognition components, which will also build up the reserves of our weekend volunteer base. We're running out of people to help us keep the visitor center open on the weekend. The trend in travel and tourism, most people are just going to weatherproof brochure racks outside. They don't even have a visitor center. That we have a visitor center is amazing. That we have one that's open 7 days a week is unheard of. So when we're looking at things that separate us from the pack, that's great. This is our fabulous board of directors, most of whom are in the audience. And then our staff. And I don't know about the sidewalks, so we'll go back one. We just got back from conference of the Texas Association of CVBs, and there was a quote attributed to Maura Gast, who's the CEO of the Irving CVB. And it really resonated with me. And I thought it was well timed that it came before this presentation. And I think it speaks to the strategic partnerships in this community. It speaks to what Larissa mentioned before me. But it's if you build a place to visit, you've built a place where people want to live. If you build a place where people want to live, you build a place where people want to work. If you build a place where people want to work, you've built a place where businesses have to be. And if you build a place where businesses have to be, you've built a place where people want to come to visit. And so you're back to one. And it all started with one visit. And we're a big deal. But kind of a big deal.
Yep.
So.
Okay, well, thank you, because I can see how that also correlates to, your increase in tourism is correlating to an increase in jobs in the service industry, so is also helping our economic development, which is fabulous. You also, at that convention, I believe, won a couple of awards.
We did.
Can you tell us briefly, because this has gone on a little bit, but can you tell us briefly what those were? Share that with us.
Advertising for the last year, and that was in our budget. So we were up against other destinations that were in our budget, and then local tourism awareness, which specifically was the wine, whiskey, and brew tour. So we presented. We were up for 4 awards, and we won 2.
That's outstanding.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you. Are there any comments from the public about our tourism? Okay, council, any comments or questions?
Okay, go ahead. Do we use the SFA students as ambassadors? Graduating every year, they either go back to their hometown or they go back to in the workforce of different cities. Could we use those as ambassadors for academics?
Not formally, not in that role. We certainly have our fair share that come in and serve as interns while they're here, but that's a great idea to send them back into their communities.
Great job.
Thank you.
I love your data. Was curious, do we have a way to collect enough data to determine the ROI on our different marketing projects?
We do, yeah. Currently, no, but that's one of the things that's one of the metrics that we want to focus on now is making sure that we can collect that. So our marketing efforts are going to involve calls to action. Awesome. So it's either going to lead them to a website that we can track or have them call in, and then our front desk staff will be trained whenever we take a phone call to always include the question, where did you hear from it? Where did you hear about us?
Love it. Same song, second verse. On the different headings, the sports, the meetings and events, and the local. So some of the KPIs are overlapping. Do we have a way to differentiate somebody that came in for Center Dixie League World Series versus somebody that came in for a SFA event?
We can track where they entered. We can't stop them from having no, you can only have sports fun. Sure. At some point it's going to get a little murky, but sure. I think for right now we'd be doing great just to track that initiating what brought them here.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Great presentation.
There's a budget here too somewhere.
Okay.
There were some numbers.
Gotcha. So we need to approve your budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you. As you can see, our income from last year totaled $590,481. Our proposed budget is 605,810, which is a 2.6% increase. You can look down at the expenses. We did encounter some unexpected expenses. Our phone system completely went out a month after I arrived. Our air conditioner just recently went out. There's a hole in the roof. Dear Liza DeLarza. So we have had to move some funds around to cover some of those. We've also, as you can see on the front and the back.
Hey, excuse me.
Yes.
You keep saying as you can see. I don't have a copy.
I did not get a copy of the budget either.
It was attached in your packet.
In the supporting documentation?
It'll be just behind agenda item number 10.
Yeah, I've got it on here, so I've got another copy.
Oh, I did see that. Okay. I got it. Yep, I did see that. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm sorry for the confusion.
Nope. Go ahead.
I've got it on my iPad. No, I'm good.
Oh, yeah, because
So we did do some readjusting in categories, not necessarily in monies. We just shifted some things around so it made more sense when it came time to account for things. So we've moved technology because before all of computers and cords, those were coming out of office supplies. The goodie bags and name tags were in office supplies as well. So we've created a guest services so that we can factor in an ROI on what we're spending to service the groups that are coming in, and exactly what staff office needs are, because that's what office supplies should be, and then separated building supplies out as well. This does indicate a pull from reserves in full transparency. It just couldn't be avoided. Before I got here, we entered into a 3-year contract with SimpleView. It's a really expensive piece of software. That contract has expired, so it's time to re-up. Those licenses have come up. So in December, we've got $6,750 to pay, and in June, $25,000. So to account for that, then we've had to pull from reserves.
anyone want to speak to the budget for CVB? Okay, council, any questions or comments about their budget? Okay. Chair would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion we pass agenda item number 10 as it's written.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? No. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
And you have, I see Joanna here and Stephanie, and I sound like Miss Romper Room again. Cheryl Bartlett, nice to see you.
Mike is at Meet the Jacks. It's Fredonia's.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your excellent job. Appreciate you very much. Okay, we are now at item number 11. Consider approval of several proposed sidewalk locations using the RLF funds. Good evening, Mr. Bartlett.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Steve Bartlett. Here tonight for your consideration of approval of several locations for new sidewalk projects. We had previously come to you with some project locations for you to review, and that slate was discussed quite a bit, and during that discussion with Council, a new proposal for a new location on Martin Luther King, east of from Shawnee to about Main Street, and was proposed. And so to give staff time to evaluate that, because obviously that you can't do that on the fly, you tabled that item. So we're back to you with that evaluation tonight. Just to kind of remind you, these project sites, this is funded under Texas Department of Agriculture's oversight with revolving loan funds, and that has been a fund we've had for a couple of decades where we funded various businesses as loan programs to them, and that program's going away, and so those funds became available. It's a mixture of state funds and our funds. That number kind of changes as people pay interest and pay back, but basically it's accumulation of those funds. And Mr. Davis and visited quite a bit with the state and kind of convinced them to allow us to use a bundle of these funds for some projects. Part of that's sidewalks, part of that's park improvements. So we're back tonight again to talk about these. We have about $842,000 in round numbers that have been appropriated towards sidewalk construction. So we took a look very carefully at the sidewalk request that came from Councilman Bolden for Martin Luther King Boulevard. The criteria that we used when we look at any of these locations was that it had adequate right-of-way existing along the road, that it was outside the floodway, that it had minimal topographic or utility conflicts because those cost money, be along city streets as opposed to TxDOT right-of-ways because the approval process and design process is much simpler on our streets. It would be served to low to moderate income folks, and so that weeds down a lot of our streets that we can use. So when you combine all these together, the slate was pretty small. In addition to that, we tried to prioritize sidewalks that would extend our current 22-mile network, not just be an orphan. It doesn't mean that's a bad thing, but we use that as a priority. And then also that these are routes that have been identified and prioritized during a series of public meetings we had in 2016 and one in early 2017, I believe, yeah. And so we wanted to match what the public told us were priority locations. So the Martin Luther King sidewalk that we looked, and originally we had proposed one piece of MLK to you as a slate of 3 locations, and that was from University Drive, where TxDOT will be building a new sidewalk, to Shawnee, and that's basically in front of the splash park area there. This project then would extend that all the way to Main Street, or we backed off a block after looking at it to Brewer. There's no sidewalks at the fire station in Main Street, so we stopped at Brewer as an alternate. When we did some detailed estimates, when we lowered our flight down and kind of took a real look at this on the ground, we estimated cost to be as much as $850,000 just for that one sidewalk. So it would basically take all of our funds when we did that. And, of course, we hope we have a conservative estimate, and we built in contingencies to that. So we may get hard bids that were less. So that wasn't necessarily the problem. It would become the project. Our bigger problem were that when we started pulling deeds and looking at plats, the right-of-way narrowed in that section, different than the splash park piece, down to 40 feet, which means we only have a few feet behind the back of curb on each side in order to put a sidewalk in. And it's riddled with utilities, power poles, and a number of things. Plus, it has a lot of topographic challenges. If you've ever driven it, there are sections where the curb, it just rises up 4 or 5 feet. So it's a lot of retaining walls. So we had over $250,000 just in retaining walls to cut that out to put these sidewalks in. All that being said and done, it's a very expensive project, but would require acquisition of about 21 easements from parcels. Texas Department of Agriculture does not say we can't acquire easements. What they say is you can't have a project with condemnations. But the risk always exists when you acquire easements in people's front yards. So we think that this project doesn't fit very well under a TDA funding scenario. Not only is it expensive and difficult, it's also going to take a longer period of time than we think we may have to finish this project, which is late spring of next year, just because of the difficulty of construction and the fact that acquisition has to be completed before we ever start construction. So getting 21 easements might well take the better part of a year, and if we go into condemnation, it'll be longer than that. So with all that said and done, we think it's a great project, and we think it's a project that really just needs to be funded under a different mechanism, whether it's our just capital funding or another grant mechanism. We think there's a lot of great aspects to that project. We have a lot of foot traffic that come, I think, work into Pilgrims and hit the University Drive area, and so I think it's a great place for us to focus on in the future. But we're asking you to go back to our original slate of sidewalks, which were West Star Avenue. Again, that's from North Street to Pearl Street. Park Street from University Drive to about Tower Road, and then also still keep the piece of MLK in front of the splash park from Shawnee to University. So we've kind of come back to that original proposal that we think is probably the most feasible. Now it's important to note tonight is just a selection of scoping. So we're not approving funding. We're not coming to you with construction contracts. If we do this, then we're going to move forward with contacting Texas Department of Agriculture and also get their approval on this slate of streets. We've got to do a simple environmental study and provide that to them as well. We've got to hire an engineering firm and surveying firms to work forward. So we've got a lot of pieces to do, but we can't move there in this critical path of things we have to do. This is first. So, again, we will come back to you for funding questions. We'll come back to you for budget amendment. We can't even take the money in to spend it until we do a budget amendment. So we'll be back for those things. Again, tonight's just scoping. Be happy to answer questions after public comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone that'd like to speak to this? Hearing none. Council, questions or comments?
Comment.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. We took the grand tour.
We did.
And I understand the issues. But my original proposal, mainly because of the issues, safety issues.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is, well, I guess you could say there is certain locations along MLK that you can't even bail out. It's too steep. If there's cars coming both ways and you wanted to step out of the street, you can't do it, basically,
right,
in some locations. And plus, disrepair the streets, and I was thinking that was considered to be high volume area. But also, like, if you look at a MapQuest from, like, traffic coming from Center and St. Augustine area, it directs you down MLK.
Mm-hmm.
Even trucks, and Pilgrim Drive has trucks coming from
Sure.
Center and that was one of my proposals, because it's a high volume area for both vehicles, trucks, and foot traffic.
Agreed.
So on the list of alternative location must be, which one did that MLK fit into, or maybe it was more than one?
Well, that we had struggles with.
Right.
We think the biggest issue is the 21 easements.
The 21 easements.
Yes, sir. Trying to get, if we had a wider right of way, give us a little latitude where to put a sidewalk and work around that terrain you're talking about, is also what's causing us to have $250,000 worth of retaining walls. So we think the right of way acquisition part, the lack of width for that, is really the biggest hurdle.
And the width was like 28 feet from curb to curb?
Yes, sir. About 28 foot from back of curb to back of curb. In a right of way that was 40. So there's about 6 foot-ish left.
On
and
each side.
If you've driven it, the power pole's about 3 foot off the back of curb, which is just a translation of dead center in the sidewalk strip. So,
but that was like 12 feet on one side, though. It wouldn't be 6 on one side and 6 on another, right?
well, it's a total of 40 feet.
Right.
And in the middle of that, there's 28 feet of
Okay.
pavement. So there's 6 and 6, generally speaking. Yes, sir.
Right. But in order to, sidewalks would be 3 feet, 4 feet?
No, our goal would be, what we'd love to have is 6 foot sidewalks everywhere. If budget gets constrained, we move back to 5 feet. Our current ordinance requirements for sidewalk are actually 4, but we would like to have sidewalks that are larger, obviously, and wider. So what I'm saying is, out of that 6 foot, we would like to have 5 feet of it as sidewalk.
The only reason why I had this question is for my next proposal coming up, not on RLF, for other general funds. Okay.
Well, Councilman, I guess what we're really saying is it is a great project, and the need is high and appropriate. And, it's not a build it and they will come. It's they've already come and we need to build it. And so you're absolutely correct, and I think you and I have agreed on that as we've reviewed it. What we're proposing to you is that council, if they want to do this as a project, needs to seek an alternate. We're suggesting you seek alternate funding, whether it's capital, budget planning, or whatever. I think it'd be better suited for that.
So tonight is just to go back to where we were several council meetings ago.
Yes, sir.
And not have MLK on.
Only the section of MLK, right, from
Right.
Shawnee
Well,
to
yeah, that was
University.
already
Yes, sir.
agreed to.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
On the sidewalk's going to be on the south side of Park Street.
Well, we haven't determined the side. We looked at a side and picked it just for, kind of general costing. So that's yet to be determined, Councilman.
Will it be? What's the relationship between the back of the curb and the sidewalk?
Well, again, we would hope to have like a 6 foot buffer in there. We have a 100 foot right of way, I believe, on Park Street. So we have room to not only move it around obstacles, but to keep a green belt on that particular street.
That's the preferred design.
Absolutely is.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And as far as MLK, is there any reason, assuming that we don't approve it tonight, that we just don't go ahead and send out letters to all of those people and say, hey, we're looking for some right of way. Could we begin this process? So if we're 3 or 4 years down the road, we've already, began the process of acquiring that right of way. Maybe 18 would just give it to us.
I think, and certainly there's some rules, and Jeff may speak better to this, but before we acquire right of way from folks, we have to have a project that's identifiable and real. So realize, I think the project itself has to precede, and Jeff, you can hit me if I'm saying it wrong, but has to precede just basically acquiring right-of-way for no reason. And I don't mean it was for no reason. So I think those would go hand in hand and in that order. So I think acquiring right-of-way is very easily first phase of any project and can be a budget year's accomplishment alone. So no, we would say, yes, we identify a project, we move forward with an early design, and then we start in a right-of-way acquisition, even if construction's in year 3 or whatever down the road. I think that's appropriate. I do think this is going to take the better part of a year to acquire those easements. It just, historically, that's what it's taken.
I agree with that. So can you, Jeff, tell us where, is that in our code, or is that a state code that says that? Or?
It's largely state law driven. Everything from the landowner's bill of rights on down, the offers we make, how we go about acquiring that. There probably be some title issues to address as well as it is with any project.
You mean whether or not they actually have the right to grant the easement?
You absolutely have it, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A lot of these are tenant occupied, and so we have owners that are families, and there may be 10 heirs in some cases that have to be cured in some form or fashion.
Are you saying that, tell me what you mean by it has to be a real project? I mean, you said you can't just say, hey, we want to put a sidewalk here, maybe 8 years down the road, but we're going to begin our right-of-way acquisition so we don't get bunched up at the end. I mean, what does it mean to have a project that qualifies for entering into a request that somebody grant us an easement? What do we have to do? Just write a note that says, hey, we're thinking about putting a sidewalk here, and that's good enough? Or
Mr. Davis, would you speak? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer it just terribly briefly. There's a lot of layers to that onion. As far as the acquisition and going through those processes, we'd have to have a project. Monies would have to be budgeted for those processes. Routinely with these types of things, we have the same situation, I think, Mr. Bartlett, out with the Direct Connect, where we have outside services that go through those processes, and without there being a project, money's budgeted, we know the scope of the project, all those things. I think those are foundational pieces to it, as well as our abilities to go out and potentially be in a situation where we'd have to condemn a property for the project.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I guess to just a simple person like me, it seems like somebody writes a letter to the property owner and says, hey, we're thinking about building a sidewalk here. Would you consider granting us a 20-foot easement? They would say yes or no.
They might do it, but it's not quite that simple. And I understand I'm not saying that doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense, but there are some processes that we have to follow as far as proper notices, proper letters informing people of their rights. There's actually what's known as a landowner bill of rights. There's a whole set of statutory requirements that have to be met.
I'll probably talk to you because that's an important issue. Because
Yes, sir.
it doesn't make sense to wait till if we want to do that project. Because one of what I'm hearing here is retaining walls are expensive, and we don't have the land. And retaining walls is a money problem. Getting the land is a time and money problem. So it seems like we'd want to move forward with that if we wanted to build that sidewalk in a few years down the road.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir. I was just going to mention that, Mr. Bartlett. As you know, I had spoke to property owners along the west side, and it was 18 of them, and 11 of them was okay if it took part of their property away, but it was 7 of them that's looking for funding. In other words, they wanted a payment for that part of the property. But also, there's a lot of rental property that's on that side, and so it's like 3 properties owned by one person and
Correct.
2 owned by another. So, but the majority of them, I think, probably would, but I don't know how much of a difference that make. If you have to pay 2, you pay all. I don't know that. So,
And all I can speak from is our experience at doing this, council member. But basically, unlike the old days, whenever the old days were, where we went and said, will you donate this easement to us, go team, and we'd hug everybody. Now we actually have to present them an offer and have an appraisal done, present them an offer. We give them the landowner's bill of rights, and we say, and if you want to donate it, you can. And it's much more difficult after we've said it's worth $1,800 or you can donate it. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm saying everybody responds differently to that, where we used to just go and knock on doors and say, will you donate it? So it's probably decreased the number of folks that donate properties, but I have no doubt some would, absolutely would. Also, when each neighbor gets paid, there's some motivation there to participate in getting paid. So all that put together, easement acquisition is a tough thing. We're going to be doing it on the direct connector. We're starting that process now. We're writing checks as we speak, trying to buy these easements, and they're significant. The cost of those easements, the actual land, as you saw maybe in the attached cost estimate, wasn't significant dollars because there's not a big strip of land. Really, the cost is the surveyors and the acquisition firm that comes and knocks the doors and chases these guys. And so there's certainly a big cost in every single parcel we do. And Mayor, if you don't mind, Councilman, let me just say I've seen in the highway world, back to your original question, if that's okay, in the highway world where they wanted to acquire right-of-way for a future freeway, for a future highway project, there was some level of design, maybe we would call it schematics, that were prepared and approved by Buddy, in that case the Highway Commission, so that there was kind of an identifiable real project. They identified the actual real right-of-way, for that project. And then the project didn't necessarily move forward with funding at that point, but it was real and had been approved by whatever governing body was over the road, and that was ample for them to move forward with right-of-way acquisition. And so just in answer to your question, I think we have to get that far down the road where the project's real, and you as a body have said that's a project we want to do. We're going to fund it in capital year 3 from now. And the reason for that is somewhere in our history, I think we went out and just bought right away, and we ended up doing takings for that. And those takings are what I think they're trying to avoid, for us just taking land and then never doing a project. So I think they're kind of making us as a group, as an entity, do more.
They being the state?
Legislature. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, but I don't think it's an excessive effort. I think it's just a real effort.
Well, I'd like to, that'd be an interesting area to study a little bit more, because I know a lot of people, that's all they make a living drawing up fake projects to show that the land and highway right-of-ways are way more expensive than the land is currently. And I'm sure you've dealt with it. Oh,
I have.
We put a hotel here, but the land is 10 times more. Sure enough, they get it.
So, but no, and I'm totally on board. We need to do that, and that's certainly in the first phase of work.
If we're going to begin, if every time we come back with an idea of how to make it just a more walkable community, the excuse is we don't have any right-of-way. Well, the way we should solve that is begin to acquire that right-of-way now when we're not in a hurry. We should put together a plan and begin to, maybe we get 90% of them at an affordable price, and the last 10% holds out, we have to pay more. But overall, the acquisition cost is lower.
And oldest town in Texas, oldest streets in Texas, and you probably heard me say that. But the nature of that beast is that a lot of our right-of-ways don't exist other than back a curb or something very, very minimal. And so we struggle with this.
Yeah, that's a tough place.
Water lines or sidewalks, I struggle.
I drove down there today. You're right. 50% of it is 3-foot retaining wall.
It is.
That's expensive.
That's correct.
Well, the only thing I would like to add is I know your office is very busy, and we appreciate you looking at this again for us. I know that took some time.
Thank you.
But it was very important to many of us here, and asked you to do
thanks
that.
a lot. That pretty detailed cost us.
Thank you.
Yeah, cost us some time, but that's okay. So, Chair will entertain a motion for approval of these sidewalk locations.
I move that we approve them.
Seconds.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve agenda item number 11 as presented. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Item number 12, consider, the fourth addition to Oak Grove Cemetery. Mr. Bray, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Brian Bray, your Director of Community Services. And I understand that hesitation looking at the agenda item because there's actually 3 items bundled into one. but they are all relating to the 4th edition of Oak Grove Cemetery, or sometimes referred to, and I apologize if I slip back and forth, but the Sloan edition. Its official name is the 4th edition. But a little bit of the background is Mr. Sloan and his family donated that land to the city for the purpose of expanding Oak Grove Cemetery. The property has already been transferred to the city. You've accepted it. We have platted it. It's been filed. At our last presentation, we brought this item before you. You gave several items of, please, go look further into this. There were some comments from the public, and hopefully we have addressed all of those questions and concerns. One of the bigger items that came up in our discussion last time was about landscaping. And so after the meeting, I contacted Texas Historical Commission Cemetery Division, specifically Jennifer McWilliams. And I sort of hit the gold mine when I talked with her, because she said actually one of her specialties is landscaping in cemeteries. And if you ever want to learn something new, a little new trade, I suggest you give her a call because it's fascinating. She said that you can actually look at the history of plants and popularity of plants by looking at historic cemeteries, and cited Oak Grove as one of them that she had looked at. And so as plants become popular, and you've probably all planted different plants in your lifetime in your house, something you planted in 1980 is not something that was really popular today in 2018. Same thing goes for Oak Grove Cemetery. So you can have an iris that is really popular in the 20s or the 30s, and you can find that same iris in burials around the 20s or the 30s. Or it might be star magnolias, it might be eastern red cedars, it might be crepe myrtles, it might be wax leaf. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And so the history of the landscaping at Oak Grove Cemetery is not one that was planned, but one that has just evolved. And literally there are plantings from one end of the cemetery to the other that cover that broad range of time frames. They're not planned because people donate spaces. I don't know of a better term to use than they donate space. And so that image that you have with the crepe myrtles up on your screen, those 2 crepe myrtles were planted in spaces that people owned in Oak Grove. Same thing with the one at the top right of the screen, the Nelson family. I'm not a plant person, so I apologize, but that shrub, I don't know what it actually is, but that green plant that is there must have been fond of the Nelson family. So they took a space and planted it there. A more recent one is the Davis family. Even though our esteemed attorney said that he thinks that Brian Holt snuck in under the cover of darkness and planted it under the starlight, the star magnolia, he actually did have permission to plant that. It's a funny story to say that he snuck in, but he had permission to plant that star magnolia there because he was fond of star magnolias. The Davis family understood if we plant this in space number 1, that is what is occupying space number 1. Over on the other side of the screen is something that we try to avoid. And Mr. Clinton Layton, who's here in the audience, who is in the cemetery department, I'm mixing words there, will agree that plantings in the walkways, such as this weeping cypress, are bad. Luckily for us, it is planted in an area that is already full, and so we do not have a need to get equipment in and out. Walkways are the purpose of equipment, so they're kind of the pathway, the roadways of such. This is what the 4th edition looks like today. This was taken just a few weeks ago. Let's see if the pointer works here. Oh, it doesn't show up on the screen, but the section that extends in with the newer color fence, that is the new edition. I cannot tell you why the section that I'm standing in when I took this picture is void of trees. You can see in this next section, this is looking the opposite direction. So the first picture is facing south. I simply spun and faced north. There are trees bordering this area, but there aren't any trees within this specific area. So what we've proposed to do, based on your feedback from the last meeting, is to have 3 eastern red cedars, 1 in each corner, so 2 in the bottom, and this would be the back side. As you're looking from the cemetery into it, you'll see 1 on either back corner. And then at the entrance from that, you would have a red cedar on the western side, and then a live oak on the other side. The reason we chose those trees is, 1, there are 5 eastern red cedars adjoining this particular section, so you can see one from the other. Obviously, it's Oak Grove Cemetery. An oak tree is an appropriate tree to plant there, but then also it's a sloped area, and oaks have larger root systems, and there are no burial spaces immediately adjacent to that proposed location for the oak, so it won't interfere with future burials. One of the other items that you had asked staff to look into was to break up this long row of spaces. So you can see on there now it says void. At the previous presentation, the voids didn't exist. We were proposing a long strip. And I'll flip back here. And you may not be able to notice it, but there are breaks in these monuments as they go along. So what we were attempting to do is not be able to break them up every 5, because we have an odd number here, but is to do smaller chunks so that it is still blending but not mimicking exactly the adjoining section. Mayor, may I pass these out here?
Yes.
I apologize, but one of my slides is rather blurry, and so I asked our engineering department to print this off for me at the last second. Wonderful folks over there. Thanks. And I just wanted you to take a look at that, and I'll put this one up here on the screen. But I wanted you to see that the idea of voided spaces is not radical. This is nothing new. This is something that's pretty standard. It is very typical to have a cemetery where every space, every part of the cemetery is platted, and then you go through and you want a roadway, you want a tree, you want a fountain, whatever it is, and then you void them. You just simply don't sell them. I cannot tell you why those spaces in that upper corner are voided. Clinton has a map, and it was from 3 or 4 superintendents ago, sometime in long lost era, and it has a big X through it, and it says "Do not sell." We don't know why it does not sell, but so this practice has been around for many years. We have the same voided spaces at Pine Grove Cemetery, and we also have some at Sunset Cemetery. And the other thing I wanted you to notice on that map is the number of spaces and sort of the layout. You can see that there are breaks in the existing section. You know, there's blocks of 5, there's blocks of 10, there's blocks of 15. It's not all the same. And then in the proposed section, once again, it's not the same. We have the same number at the bottom and in the middle, but then at the top it's smaller. So we're trying to kind of, once again, mimic that same idea of the adjoining cemetery. And one of the items you had also asked us to look at was, what would it look like if we expanded from this proposed 4th edition, or from the 4th edition at the time, it was proposed. And so this is simply that layout. The idea is not that we are going to expand to the west. It's if we were to expand to the west, this is not part of your approval this evening, just as information, we would be able to have a very similar layout to the 4th edition, which is our topic for this evening. Covering the sort of the main part of the agenda item tonight, and that is the pricing and then the allocation process for them. We had only contacted a handful of cemeteries last time. I don't know the exact number, but I think it was maybe 10, 12 different cities. And since our last meeting, we've gone out and looked at 67 different cities. 15 of them have city-owned cemeteries, but no longer have space available. 23 of those cities we contacted didn't own cemetery spaces, which left us with 25. Hopefully someone better at math can check my numbers, but I think it was 25 cemeteries where we actually had numbers where we could get, and they averaged to $871. Those numbers are skewed a little bit because some of them are older cemeteries that simply haven't updated their prices. So we went to the next level and looked at 3 cemeteries that were historic cemeteries who had added space, similar to what we've done here, in the last 15, 20 years. And that left us with, Huntsville, Georgetown, and Palestine. Huntsville, pretty famous cemetery. It's where Sam Houston resides today. Their spaces are 1,000. Georgetown has 2 cemeteries, both of them from the 1800s, and they are $1,200 and $1,600 apiece. But then they tack on a $225 maintenance fee. So really, it's not $1,600. It's closer to $1,900 and closer to $1,500 than $1,200. And then Palestine is at $750. So the process that we are proposing is very similar to the process we proposed last time, with a slight change in that, notice it says that we are proposing to start the process September 11th. Even though we're in August, we would with the help of the Sentinel and KTRE ran a piece yesterday, and obviously with the help of Amy Mahaffey, our communications director, would like to promote this and make sure that everybody knows that this lottery process, if approved, is going to take place. Because we don't want anyone to miss a chance to acquire these spaces. So the proposal is for basically a month, from September 11th to October 11th, we will collect names. Very simple. You can call me, you can email me, you can stop by the office. We want anyone who might live in Connecticut who has family members here to be able to participate. That's fine. We're still proposing a maximum of 2 spaces per household. On October the 11th, we will have printed off all the contacts and put them into a hat, and we'll have someone draw those names out, not one of our city staff, but a sort of a third person. And then the first 30 names that are drawn out are the ones that we will contact, because there are 60 spaces sold in pairs of 2, gives us 30 names that we are going to be looking for. We're recommending $1,500 per space or $3,000 per pair. So, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions if after public comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this? Yes, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I thought it was requested the last time that the issue of orientation be addressed as well. This one lot happens to be at a skew angle to the cemetery, but hopefully one would see down the road not just the immediate adjacent lot, but potentially significantly more of the space between the cemetery and Main Street could be acquired for cemetery expansion. And I don't understand why an orientation that only happens to align with the existing lot would be chosen to encumber the rest of the potential expansion. And if it seems like if things were lined up, that it would give you some triangular areas on either side that might be more conducive to working out landscaping and so forth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to this? Council, questions or comments for Mr. Bray?
You mentioned maintenance fee for one. Is that a one-time fee or is that a yearly fee?
That cemetery was a one-time fee.
One time.
And Mayor, may I'll kind of address
Yes, I was
Mr.
gonna
Phillips'
ask you
question?
to, 'cause that
And so
makes-
that we did not address, because this was an item that was already platted and filed with the courthouse. And so what we presented last time was what we basically have up on the screen, and that was the process for allocation and then the price for. And then one thing we addressed that was not on the agenda was the landscaping part. So, yes, ma'am, Mr. Phillips is absolutely correct. We did not, but I also apologize if I missed that. I don't remember being
I don't
asked
remember
that. So,
that either.
if I did, I will take the blame for not addressing that. But that's not something that we were able to do because it's already been platted, and I'd have to refer to Mr. Davis here because I don't know what that process would entail.
Over again. Okay. It seems to me that you could even, if you kept it the way it is, and we eventually did purchase or were able to get the rest of that land, it could even it out going up to the corner. I mean, that would, if there are more additions, it could be fanned out a little bit to where it all evens up, so that you don't have to start.
Yes,
all
ma'am,
over.
and you can see on at least this partial blurry one, nothing is exact in that cemetery.
That's true. That's true. Council, any questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. We approve agenda item number 12, A, B, and C.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I'm just to be consistent with my, no, I don't have a question. I just want to be consistent with my vote last time, and because of the orientation issue, and a bigger issue is that this, I voted for the approval of the subdivision. That I did, and I kind of wish I hadn't have done that. That was one of the ones you wish you hadn't have done. But I just want to say there's a bigger issue here is that we were brought a subdivision plat. This is the way we're going to do it. We've already hired a surveyor. It's been completely done. I'm hoping that, like I asked Ms. Philpott, if we could get a kind of an interim version of the plan she was working on, that things could come to us before they were an up or down decision on something that's already been done, because it is not, in my opinion, the best thing to take an orientation based off a lot line that was not part of the original subdivision. That kind of throws off the nature of it. And so, I mean, I'm sure this motion will pass, and I'm sure that the pricing seems fair, and all that is fine. But to be consistent with my original concerns, I just won't vote for this. But overall, I think it's a fine project.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Number 13, we are going to table since Mr. Jeffers is not here. So we will move to agenda item number 14. Consider annual appointment of Mayor Pro Tem Poor and Vice Mayor Pro Tem Poor. This is something annually the council appoints a person to serve in the stead of the mayor if they cannot fulfill their duties. Sounds like a Miss America pageant when I said that. Sorry. And so after very careful thought, I would like to make a motion that we approve our Mayor Pro Tem as Mr. Roy Bolden, and our Vice Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Garth Hens. So I would entertain a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Item number 15, consider board appointments for the Zoning Board of Adjustments. We had some really good applicants and great interviews for this particular board. So the chair will nominate for a full term Mary Ann Bentley to fill an unexpired term, Rhonda Ward, and as alternates, Nancy Smith Day and John Wyndham. And I need a second, please.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. And now number 16, reoccurring item on agenda for members of City Council to address items not on the agenda. Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, I put this on here just so that we could, basically the same as citizens communication, so that if any council member had something that they wanted to talk about, and it's something to only state facts about, we can't enter into discussions and or get public policy stated that we address. And so whatever you wanted to talk about, you have the option to do that. I'm not sure I like the idea about not on the agenda because, say, for instance, right now, while we were talking, I looked up some of the budget issues, regarding the Economic Development Fund, and I would have liked to gone back and say, well, what about this? And that would have been a clarification of a fact, a stated just a fact that's not open for discussion or anything. So I don't know why it has to be not on the agenda, but for now, we'll just leave it like that. But I don't have anything I want to say this time. I just wanted that to be something on all agendas from the future, so that if there's something that you want to talk about, you're welcome to talk about that.
Okay. Well, I'm a little bit confused from reading the AIS, because council members may not enter into discussions or subjects of requirements. However, staff or other council members may respond, so as long as these respond, are limited to. Okay. So what, please, can you just state again what you're looking for?
Basically, when you have a meeting, you're not allowed to enter into a conversation or a discussion that hadn't been posted. That's the requirements of the open meetings law.
Right.
We can't sit here and talk about something, and it's a way to make sure that if anybody wants to read what's going on at the meeting, they can read what's going on in the meeting and be there for it. But what it does allow, and that's the other part that's in here of the Open Meetings Act, that says council members may respond as long as those responses are limited to, and these are the exceptions, a statement of specific factual information given in response to the inquiry, or a recitation of existing policy in response to the inquiry. So in other words, if I wanted, I think if I said to Ms. Philpott, I see on this thing we have a $400,000 interfund transfer, and then she could come up and explain why that was, even though it was on a previous meeting. Or if I wanted to bring up anything, ask whatever the question was, I could ask it, but I couldn't discuss it. We couldn't deliberate about it.
Okay. Well, yes, Mr. Davis.
I'm sorry to interrupt the discussions, but I would raise a point of order in that with regard to this item as it's presented, I don't know that this item on our agenda satisfies 551.041 for the notice requirements of the Open Meetings Act. And because it doesn't, and it varies from an action item, as we see on up in the agenda for, say, a consideration to take a vote on, should you want to try to do this or not, or discussions really about it, I don't think that as we have it here presented, I think it digresses from how we take action. Also, I don't think it gives proper notice for us to get into discussions as to whether this is something to try to do in the future or not. Could it be placed in a proper form on a future agenda? Possibly so. But as stated here, I don't believe that this satisfies 551.041 that sets out what we must provide in our agendas for proper notice, so the general public can know whether they want to attend and participate in these matters or not.
Right. But the way I look at it is we allow citizens to do that.
Yes, sir. And I'm going to, with all due respect,
absolutely,
because right now we can't have discussion on this.
Okay.
Because discussion is the same under the Act as deliberation.
Fine, I agree.
The law supports that. So I apologize. I don't know that I've done this since I've been city attorney, but at this point I would call it a point of order because I don't think this is properly on the agenda for discussion or a consideration for a vote at this time.
Right, but the way I see it is each council member is allowed to put something on the agenda. I mean, that's what you can put anything, one person.
Yes, sir. With us, even though Councilmember Moore getting into these discussions, and I think that we're going outside of what the Act provides with the way it's on this particular agenda.
Okay.
Well, there's no action or anything. It's just what this really is. It's a chance to open up.
And I'm sorry to
okay. So
I
will approve.
But point of order. This is not proper for discussion at this time.
Okay.
Present on this agenda.
So you called the point of order and you explained it. So I will make a motion to uphold the point of order, making this an improper agenda item for discussion tonight. Does that sound okay? I mean, is that a good motion?
Yes, ma'am. You could certainly make the motion if you were so inclined to uphold the point of order that this does not satisfy the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
There will be no further discussion on this matter.
Okay.
If that is seconded and there's a vote.
Well, Okay. Well, I'm just trying to make a motion on your point of order. I don't know if it's actually, okay. Making a motion to uphold the point of order for this agenda item. Okay. So I would need a second.
I'll second.
Okay. And then we can't have any discussion on a point of order, correct? Or just the point of order?
You could have a brief discussion whether
On the point of order.
uphold it or not, but we couldn't go back in
Correct.
to readdress because it would violate what the point of order has been brought forth in
Gotcha.
the first place.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay. Point of order passes. We are not having executive session, I believe. Is that correct? No executive session? Okay. So thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. Meeting is adjourned.